Huntington's disease is a progressive brain disease which causes you to lose control of your movements so that you eventually reach the point of being unable to walk. It will cause you to deteriorate mentally as well, although the mental deterioration is variable, and some of the people who can't walk at all are pretty good mentally. It's a fatal disease, and it's a terrible disease.
There are almost 1,000 people down here who are carrying this time bomb, and it's going to go off. We knew that this is a genetic disease, that it's passed from parent to child. That's the one safe thing we know about it. So what you want to find in genetics, if you're looking for a gene, you want to find really big families that have this genetic disease. And that's exactly what we set out to find. We started putting together the family tree, and all our descendants and their relatives from a woman who lived in the early 1800s in a little tiny stilt village, and she was very aptly named Maria Concepcion. The beauty of this family is that the chromosome from Maria Concepcion has traveled through 9 generations down to the families that we're studying today, the people with Huntington's disease in the barrios, the children who we know are carrying this disease, but it hasn't shown up yet. And they all have exactly the same chromosome. I mean, that is such a powerful tool. It doesn't exist anywhere else in the world.
In 1980, a cynic would have said, you foreigners will not be able to get cooperation from the local community. And indeed, the local people have been and still are to some extent suspicious of us. But the reason that we have gotten cooperation is that we touch the people. I don't mean in a figurative sense, I mean in a literal sense. We, and the ladies here have been the mainstays of this, will come into the barrio, will touch people, do not leave after 5 minutes as they're used to seeing from government bureaucrats. So I suspect that if this had been a project, as most were in the 60s and 70s, of all male investigators, it might have had a different outcome, not because we lacked the brains, but because we wouldn't have paid sufficient attention to those human touches.
Well, for me, it's just to be able to come down and come to a different part of the world to help a group of people where you really think you're not only going to help them, but allow there to be breakthroughs for the rest of science. That's really something that I would never give up.
Get up early, pack up all the equipment that we're going to need for the course of the day in the cars, the vans, whatever we have at hand. We try to anticipate what's going to come up. We take the labels for all the people, for all the paperwork. We take blood tubes. We take the neurologic equipment, the psych tests. We try to make sure we don't forget anything, because in the morning you're sort of running. Scales for weighing people. We have to take food and water for us to drink because it's hard to get locally. And we set out. Both in San Luis and in Barranquitas, there's a little government-funded clinic. And we can use the offices in those clinics if they're not being used. People just come pouring in.
Last year when I came to Venezuela, I saw more people affected by Huntington's in 1 week than I'd seen in 5 years in San Diego. It's just an incredible difference.
The very first thing you want to do is to find out who this person is, and you need to look them up in the pedigree, because you can't just ask them their name. You have to say, are you the child of such and such and such and such, and the father or the mother of these children. And generally when you check somebody in, you find out that they've had more children, they've had some grandchildren, so you update the pedigree.
So identifying who they are is, oddly enough, the most important thing, God help you if you collect data on someone with labels all over the place that turns out to be the wrong person because you've really messed things up.
What we're trying to do now in even more depth is look at what is somebody's neurologic functioning, how are they doing on the exams from year to year, how quickly do people get sick, how rapidly do they decline.
My job as a neurologist was always just to come down here and to do as many neuros as possible and to do them as efficiently as possible and not to make any mistakes.
A ver, una sonrisa, nosotros queremos una sonrisa. Eso es, así. Esa sonrisa linda.
Padella Gomez is extraordinary. She makes giving blood fun, if you can imagine that. She makes people laugh, she sings songs, she's like, a million-mile-an-hour tornado, making jokes and talking to them, and before they even know what's happened, their blood is over and done, and they feel so proud of themselves that they gave blood and it didn't hurt.
This project is something that gives everybody who works with Huntington's patients hope. For 10 years now, we've been able to pre-symptomatically tell people whether or not they were going to get this disease. And yet, at the same time, there's absolutely nothing that we can do about it if they do get the disease. This project, at least, is attempting to change that.
The people have been wonderful in terms of their cooperation and collaboration with this project. If it weren't for their dedication to our work, we wouldn't, perhaps we wouldn't have found the gene yet.
When the gene was actually discovered, it was discovered in the cells of people that we see with our own two eyes here today. These families, the power of these families to give an answer has been so spectacular that at first they gave the answers to the neighborhood of the gene, and then now they've given an answer as to the actual identity of the gene, which is really amazing.
I think that we're living in a golden age of molecular biology as applied to major human diseases, and that 25 years from now, people will look back to the events of this time and say, gee, that was something special.
So we go wherever the families are, and you never know where that's going to take you. We do a lot of work in people's homes. We just go put the backpack on your back and walk down the street, which is sweltering, and just go home to home. Both San Luis, Barranquitas, wherever we are. And it sometimes can be very chaotic trying to test people in their homes. It's fine if they have a big backyard, but if you just have a little tiny house, it can be very tough. But it also is probably more realistic because you're actually seeing somebody at home where they really are. Sometimes there are people who can't walk to the clinic, but sometimes there are people who are working or who maybe shy about coming into the clinic. So we go and we go to them.
Okay, muy bien. Muy bien, muy bien.
You go into a place where people have a tremendous amount of necessities for people who are enduring the most devastating circumstances. And what you do is going to really matter to people. We couldn't help cure Huntington's, but people were suffering, unbelievably from fungal infections of the skin, from parasites. And so Dr. Margot DeYoung has been treating people, and suddenly all that suffering from all these other causes has been remarkably alleviated. And so that's something that you can do. There's no reason why you should have to have Huntington's and parasites. So, you can treat the parasites and the person feels a lot better. And so that's what we really have been trying very hard to do. And Margot is just a saint. I've never met anybody like her in my life. She's extraordinary.
I mean, if there was one thing that was very frustrating for us was to have to leave and to sort of like abandon these people. And so Margot provides a continuity, and she has gotten other professionals and people very involved in what's going on here. And so now the government contributes, and the families have more than they had before, although it's still, I think, a very miserable situation.
More than all the others, it's the children who are sick that get you the most, because these are the children who should be on their way up when they're on their way down. Every year, instead of gaining a new capacity, they're losing a new capacity. So you think, well, are we going to make it in time for them? But then you look at all the children that are standing around them in the backyards and holding their hand, taking care of them, and you know that so many of those children are going to get sick. The same thing's going to happen to those children. When I first met Eduardito, he was practicing Kung Fu. We would play Kung Fu together, and he was a fantastic little Kung Fu artist. When we first saw him, it wasn't really obvious that he had Huntington's. It makes you feel so incredibly sad, because you see that beginning tenseness. They really move, you know what's coming. He's very engaged, he's very there. But he has a hard time expressing himself. It's hard to understand. His brothers are very sad because they have developed the disease later than he has. You know that you have Huntington's and see your little brother, Eduardito, and see that constant reminder of what the I think with Julie, I knew her. She was just beginning to get sick when I knew her. I never saw her when she was totally healthy. But she still was, could run like wild. And when I came, she'd always just run as fast as she could down the street and jump into my arms. And now, everybody here gets so hooked that you can't, there's no way you can walk away. You just can't do it. And you just keep feeling, if I could just have one more day, one more exam, one more blood, one more test, and maybe we would get the clue that would save these kids.
And I think one of the most helpful things for the patients and families has been to participate in a research project and to be doing something for themselves. Of course, this particular family has contributed a lot to all the other hundreds of thousands of patients who are affected by Huntington's disease.
And I think everyone was set on finding the gene, which needed to happen. And it's just the beginning. It's the beginning of a lot more work to understand this disease and to come up with a treatment for the disease, and eventually, of course, to find a cure for the disease. But in the meantime, we can't get too far removed from the individuals and what they need right now today.
It's always amazed me how this has been such a marriage of super, super high-tech science and the intimacy of a family. Not even a clinic, but a real community of people collaborating together to come up with an answer. And it's been tremendously successful. In 3 years, we localized the gene. In 10 years, we found the gene, thanks to the samples of the families here. But now we need to travel from all the symptoms that that gene produces to understanding how the gene does it, and then trying to figure out what is the very best treatment that can intervene in that process and stop it cold.